Hello, hello. Welcome back to Loki's Librarian. I am the librarian Katrina. If you are new here, welcome. This is where I am reading through the enormous library of books you see behind me. Then I give you a quick synopsis and tell you what I think about them. And then because I needed something to do with my hands instead of being all touching my face, I added booze to the mix a few weeks ago to make this a Booze and Books on Sunday feature. Now, just in time for the holiday binge, this week's book of the week is Why We Get Fat and What to Do About It by Gary Taubes. That's my pen, pardon the rattle, which joined my library a few years ago after I saw an interview with Taubes and John Stossel. I believe it was on Reason.com. And because I am 5 foot 4 inches tall and weigh 190 pounds, I decided I need to know how to stop this because that shit is not healthy. I run out of breath walking upstairs. You guys got a little glimpse of that last week when I had to run downstairs middle of recording to pick up a can opener and I was gasping for air, and it's like 14 steps when I was gasping for air. And you know, doors closed are a bad thing in Catland. And then when I go downstairs, I have to literally go one step at a time. Like I take a step and then bring my other foot level because my knees hurt. I've had heartburn for 2 decades because I'm fat. So here we go. Now, this is technically my second foray into a health book. Oh, this week I'm not doing a clever cocktail. I am sharing with you why I am fat, which is, at least according to the book, beer. Not specifically this brand of beer. It's delicious, which is why it's my beer this week, but this is Lead Dog Brewing Peanut Butter Stout. Full disclaimer, it is not their fault I am fat. They did their job. They made an absolutely delicious drink, and I drink a lot of it. A lot might be exaggerated. Enough that I'm sure it's having an impact, and we'll get into all of that. So, the first health book I read was Pandora's Lab, which was more about kind of weird science and how science has, well, fucked up health-wise. And this book basically continues that trend. And a lot of what I read actually reinforced sections of Pandora's Lab. I mean, not the whole book, because that one specifically covered 7 incidents, one of which was trans fats, and that's definitely covered in this book. This one more specifically goes into how we've been hoodwinked on the matter of fats. He only peripherally touches on trans fat, but he does touch on fats in general, especially how natural fats from animals are not as unhealthy as we've been led to believe. Basically, the belief that they're unhealthy is only about 40 years old. 50 years old now at this point. 60? It would have to be 60 because it started in the 1960s. 60 years old. So he does a solid job of laying out, now in part 1, author Gary Taubes does a solid job laying out what we think we know about obesity and weight loss may be wrong. And some of what he says, like I said, matches with Pandora's Lab. I'll include a link to that in the description below. Now, the traditional belief is that calories in needs to be less than calories out, which makes sense, right? I mean, that's logical. I mean, we've been told all our lives, and this has been accepted science for quite a while now. So much so that when obese people seek treatment, apparently there are not a whole lot of metabolic doctors out there, so they get shuttled to mental health care. Because obviously it must be a problem with, binging, and for some people, sure it is, but for some of us, it genuinely isn't. I'll admit that binging is probably how I got here. I mean, for about 5 years, I basically subsisted on those sugar cookies with the thick frosting and mozzarella sticks. I mean, that was like my go-to diet for about 5 years. So I'm pretty sure that was a huge contributing factor in my sudden weight gain. And then just, I discovered beer, and here we are. Now, in this section 1, there's 2 parts to the book. In section 1, he carefully dissects all the usual explanations of traditional diet culture and the problems with increasing your exercise, which is like, the phrase work up an appetite. He kind of breaks that down and how that plays a part, which is true. I mean, if you use a calorie tracking app and you're operating on the belief of calories in, calories out, you go to the gym, you do, 30 minutes weightlifting, 30 minutes on a Stairmaster or a treadmill, and you're going to put that into your calorie tracking app, and it's going to say, oh, you've burned 400 calories, for example. So then you're going to go home and be like, well, I can totally have a cookie after dinner. I burned 400 calories today. So as long as the cookie's only 200 calories, I'm still, less calories than I burned, and I will still be losing weight. And that's not what happens. So that doesn't work at all, because you're eating the sugar that is causing your insulin to spike, and that quality of calorie is such trash that you're derailing your efforts at the gym by consuming this sugary, nasty garbage that is no good for you anyways. So that's kind of the point he's getting at, is the quality of the calories you're consuming make a massive difference in your ability to lose weight. And the problem with a low-fat diet is not so much that you're cutting out a huge part of what's healthy for you, because again, those fats are not necessarily unhealthy for you. There's actually been very little studies or science done on that. The problem with a low-fat diet is that they go for, damn it, I've derailed my own brain. Time for a sip of what makes me fat so I can figure out where I was going with that thought. If you go for a low-fat diet, right, and you're looking for all these things that have low fats in them, chances are you're actually eating more sugar, because the sugar replaces the flavor that the fat naturally produced on its own. And then that sugar, of course, keeps your insulin levels spiked. And something that's apparently been known among the health communities for well over 100 years at this point is that insulin is directly responsible for how your fat cells react. So when you're constantly bombarding yourself with starchy foods and sugar and liquid bread, your insulin levels stay elevated, and that's directing your body to store fat as fat. So instead of using the fat to burn it as fuel, you're storing it as fat. And that is what the problem is. So when you go to the gym and you do your workout and you come home and say, I've been good, I can have a cookie, all that's happening is you're negating the effects of everything. Now, this book does not specifically address exercise. He talks a little bit about it. Exercise is probably good for you, but mostly this book is like focused on diet and how what we're eating is the wrong stuff that's causing these problems. And what was really good about the book is he talks about how he basically in the intro says that this book is kind of the beginner's guide to his book, Good Calories, Bad Calories, which was actually written first. So this is kind of a more condensed version. I think I need to read Good Calories, Bad Calories, right? Because I think that there's going to be even more of the details in there as to why these things are bad versus, why. I believe him. I absolutely believe him, but I think there's more detail in that one. But since I'm kind of a book buying hiatus, I probably won't get to it until 2023. The point that he's making is that the quality of calories most people are consuming are nutrient deficient. So we eat these highly processed white bread, which causes your insulin to spike. And there's a ton of evidence that obesity causes the insulin to climb, which can cause type 2 diabetes. Now, that sounds counterintuitive because diabetes is when your body stops producing insulin. Okay? And the reason it stops producing insulin is because basically you've overloaded the system and fried the circuits. That's the best analogy I can come up with for you, is you eat so much over-processed crap that your body loses the ability to function. And that's what causes the absolute decrease in insulin, which you might think is a good thing. If insulin hormone regulates our fat and the highly refined sugars and starches that compose the Western diet overloads our system with insulin, you eventually get an insulin resistance, which means you're clinging onto your fat more than you should. Too much sugar forces the body to produce more and more insulin, which results in this resistance, adds more weight gain. Push it further, you develop type 2 diabetes, your pancreas shuts down and stops producing it all. You just overloaded that circuit, you fried it. And I buy it. The reason I believe him is because if lack of insulin is all it takes to lose weight, one of the hallmark symptoms of type 2 diabetes is a sudden unexplained weight loss. You just lose weight. And it happens fast. I know my dad's type 2 diabetic. I haven't really talked to him about how much weight he lost to before he went in and saw the doctor. I do know that when my dog developed diabetes, he had his regular checkup in early August, and a month later he had lost 10 pounds, which is a lot of weight for a dog to lose. Even a big dog. He was a Rottweiler, and that's a big dog, but that's a lot of weight. And that's one of those hallmark symptoms, is that sudden weight loss. You think that's a good thing, right? Like, oh, hey, maybe if I just stop producing insulin, I'll lose all this weight and then I'm on easy street. Well, no, you're not, because what happens is your blood sugar climbs and climbs. And that causes excessive thirst, that sudden weight loss we just mentioned. And if you don't realize what's going on, it will drop you into a coma and you can die. because your sugar goes so high it doesn't regulate and the insulin is needed. It's a very finely controlled hormone, and we're all abusing it horribly, basically. It's carefully balanced and regulated, and your body does quite a good job of that if you don't overload it with junk. And carbohydrate dense diet full of completely empty calories like sugar and refined starches, your weight gain ensues because the insulin directs those excess sugars into your fat cells. If you stop spiking your blood sugar, your insulin levels will drop naturally, resulting in natural weight loss, hopefully without the problematic diabetes. But if you've overloaded that system too far, you may develop it. That's part of what got me interested in this book. Is when I had my annual checkup a few years ago, they did a blood panel on me, and I'm like kissing up against pre-diabetes, which is not a good place to be health-wise. And I think for a chunk of the population, and this is one of the things I really liked about this book, is he does go into this. This isn't going to be true for everybody. I mean, because life isn't fair, right? There are some people who can do the calories in, calories out, and boom, their weight just melts off, and they keep it off, and they're healthy, and I mean, good for them. You know, lucky bastards. They have a metabolism. They haven't fucked up too badly. But for the rest of us, I mean, 5 solid years, I'm eating those sugar cookies and mozzarella sticks, and that's my food. That's what I'm eating. I mean, God, no wonder my metabolism is shit right now. And beer is basically just liquid bread. And bread is empty calories. You don't get anything from them. And essentially, the carbohydrates that you should be eating are leafy green vegetables and non-starchy vegetables. So potatoes, corn, lima beans, those are out. Vegetables like, kale. We all know kale. But like broccoli is a good vegetable. You could probably eat squash and was cucumbers on the list? I don't know. He did include a medically recommended diet. It was in the appendix of the book that had a list of vegetables that are okay to eat. It was easier to look at it and go, okay, this is what you should not be eating. And that's what's broken down in part 2, like pretty consistently. He clearly shows this link between insulin production, insulin resistance, diabetic development, but also the host of conditions known as metabolic syndrome. And what he says, I mean, basically the way that experts have seen it for a while now is that your fat storage is like a long-term savings account. I mean, you can dip into it at need for energy, but generally it's just a savings account for your body, right? Your body's going to take the excess calories and stash them as fat, and they're going to stay there until you find yourself underfed, and then the fat mobilizes, and that's what that calorie deficiency is supposed to do. You drop yourself into a calorie deficit, and you're going to start losing weight. You'll start losing weight, but it may not be fat you're losing. It could be muscle tissue, and that's not a good thing. And as he said, it's been known since the 1930s that this conception isn't even remotely accurate. So why is it so consistently pushed? Basically, World War II happened. They were right on the brink of discovering this and working with it, and then World War II happened, and where the bulk of the research on this was being done was Germany. And of course, German scientists, they were mud after World War II, and not without cause, right? I mean, there was some pretty shit-tastic stuff going on in Germany, and their research would certainly be suspect for quite a variety of reasons. I have a book on Mengele. I think I'm going to read that soonish because I want to know more specifically about the horrors of the concentration camps and what they did. Suffice to say that what happened was certainly cause to make the research suspect, but it's not necessarily that it should all be ignored. If you don't learn from history, you repeat it. Isn't that the oft-repeated saying? And it's true. Learning... I'm going to back down off this road because there was some shit stuff. Nothing good came out of the Holocaust. But part of the nothing good that came out of it was the burying of research that might have helped with this whole obesity epidemic we find ourselves in. And he breaks down why it's not accurate. He does this over and over again, shooting down many of the commonly held beliefs which have been deemed scientifically sacrosanct, and highlighting some of the rebels who break with science to achieve frankly stunning results, not least of which was Dr. Atkins. I know the Atkins diet, kind of experienced a jump in popularity in the 90s. It's been around since 1972. So since 72, this has been known. I think part of the reason that people say low carbohydrate diets don't work truly does come down to willpower on some metric. And he compares it frequently to alcoholics and smokers and drug addicts, right? I mean, an alcoholic can build up a tolerance for alcohol, requiring more alcohol to get drunk. Or a drug addict eventually needs more of their drug to get high. Breaking the sugar dependency is hard. And it is a dependency. It is an addictive substance. It's a completely legal addictive substance, but it is addictive. And part of why they fail, it's has nothing to do with dieters not following the diet, but rather what the diet consists of. And cutting out fat when the fat is not a problem is going to lead to dietary failure. And just like when somebody trying to restrict carbohydrates, what happens is the same as with somebody who tries to quit smoking, drinking, or doing drugs, right? They'll think, oh, this isn't so bad, I can handle this. And then they might go to a party, and for an alcoholic, they might have a sip of alcohol and go, oh, well, the sky didn't fall down. I'm cured, I can drink again. Or, the drug addict might think, oh, well, I haven't had anything in such a long time, and this is, I'm being a good boy, this is a good party. I can, have a little bump of cocaine and be just fine, and then suddenly, boom, they're back in the rabbit hole. Well, you might go to a party and have a piece of cake, right? And the sky doesn't fall, the earth doesn't tremble, you don't immediately balloon back up to your pre-diet weight, because that's the conception. That's what most people think, right? Is if I have that piece of cake, I'm going to explode again. I'm going to wake up tomorrow, today I weigh 120 pounds, and if I have that piece of cake tomorrow, I'm going to weigh 140. I'm going to gain 20 pounds overnight because of that one piece of cake. And that's not what happens. You wake up the next day and maybe you didn't gain any weight because you're at your fasted weight now, right? Break fast, you're at your fasted weight. So they think maybe it wasn't the carbs that made me fat. And they start eating the cake again and it all comes back. They start eating carbs again. And then they make the conclusion that diets don't work, even though it was working just fine, they broke the diet. And I'm more or less convinced by this book. I mean, I'm convinced enough that I'm going to try it for 6 months. So this is kind of a farewell beer. And the reason I say that is because I actually don't eat that many carbs. I mean, I look at I have been tracking my calories, and I don't eat a whole lot of sugar. I mean, I had pie with Thanksgiving, but I don't eat a whole lot of sugar. It's not a daily thing anymore like it was. I think every other week, maybe I might have a piece of pie or a cookie or something, but it's not a daily thing anymore. I actually don't eat bread. Bread's not in the house. I might have bread if we have stew for dinner, but that's not every day, so that's not a problem. The carbs that I ingest are a beer. I have a beer with dinner. I like beer. Not just dark beer. I like ale, pale ale, lagers, IPA, double IPAs. This is a stout. I like beer. Beer has flavor. Beer is fun. I'll miss it. But I want to see if I can lose weight, because 190 pounds at 5'4" is not healthy, not by any metric. If you're part of the fat acceptance movement, good for you. You do you. It's not healthy for me. This is not what I want to be. I don't want to have my knees hurt when I walk downstairs. I don't want to be running out of breath walking around the block. This is not healthy. So I'm going to try it for 6 months. I'm going to, as he says, you don't have to specifically track your calories on this. Just cut out the carbs that are not leafy greens or non-starchy vegetables. And I already started. I'm super proud of me. We actually ended up going out to dinner the last 2 nights, and I didn't get rice when we went to the sushi place. I just had the meat and the vegetables. And then when we went out to dinner last night, I had steak and the vegetables, and I didn't touch the potatoes. And I'm super proud of me for that, although I had beer with dinner, because you don't go to a brewery and not have beer with dinner. What kind of crazy person does that? I am going to track my calories, though, and I'm not tracking the calories in, calories out so much as that the app that I use is going to tell me that protein fat carb ratio, so I can make sure I'm cutting my carbs enough. I should be, right? If I'm cutting out the beer and beer is my major source of carbs, that should eliminate the problem. We're going to test that theory. So I'm going to check it out. And there's a lot of information in this book. It's not just the trouble with diabetes. I mean, insulin is the primary point that he's focusing on, because insulin, he has pinpointed as being the source of why we get fat and how we stay fat, is this overproduction of insulin in your system. And if carbohydrates are what trigger insulin production, yes, his logic follows, and I'm sound with it. And the diabetes just hit home for me because of my dad being diabetic and because of my own status as almost pre-diabetic, and because my goodest doggo, he was diabetic for 7 years, and we lost him just a few months ago. So that's a disease that I knew a lot about, and so I was able to really follow what he was saying as a result of my existing knowledge. I did especially like his comparisons of sugar and refined starches to tobacco, drugs, and alcohol, because you don't need carbohydrates to survive, okay? The carbs you ingest from leafy greens and non-starchy vegetables will provide you with your required nutrients. Sugar and starch are nutritionally deficient, as in they hold no nutritional value at all. They taste good. That's why we eat them. They taste good. Doesn't mean they're healthy for you, not even a little bit. And and the links he draws between those starches, the increased consumption of starches and carbohydrates, correlates to increases in heart disease. Now, correlation is not causation, but what he cites is pretty compelling. And he's very careful. I mean, he is a professional journalist. He very carefully points out what tracks, what's been studied, where studies have been done, where they haven't been done, and why he believes what he does. And it's a good book. It was good. And it really is about removing something that you're addicted to. I mean, sugar has all the addictive properties of heroin, complete with the endorphin rush when you consume it and the withdrawals when you stop. I fully expect to have withdrawals from my no more beer. That's okay. It's okay because I actually don't think I have an addictive personality, and that would be a completely separate book. But I am somebody who has always had the ability that when I say I'm done with something, I walk away. Video games is my biggest thing. I decided I was done playing World of Warcraft, and I haven't touched it in like 5 years because I was done with it. I got tired of it. So I'm tired of being fat. Tired of being fat means no more beer. And I'll probably keep my cocktail on the weekend. I'm just going to have to really carefully monitor it and make sure I'm not hitting those carb limits. Like The Magician was a really good one because it was high fat, low carb. But I'm not just going to drink that one. You already know that cocktail. So yeah, this was a quick read. And it left my mind spinning, right? I mean, it kind of left my mind spinning on what the government says is good for us, which it's funny it took me so long to get here because, I mean, since when has the government actually given a damn about we the people? They care about what lines their pockets because that's what government does. Government is force. And so they got that food pyramid we all know about, right? We were all taught that in high school. Get all your grains in. Well, those grains are making you fat. And it seems when South Park turned that pyramid upside down, they weren't just joking around. They may have been actually 100% right. And among many things I loved is that he was really systematic. Like every time I'd be reading this book and I'd be like, what about X? Like a few pages later, X would be addressed. So it's logically laid out for how the brain progresses down a chain of thoughts. And yes, we've been eating grains for about 10,000 years, right? I mean, you can trace that back to the start of agriculture. But we were hunter-gatherers for literally millions of years before that. I mean, like 99.9% of our time as a species, our diet was heavy on protein and fat, minimal with carbohydrates. And it's really only in the last 200 years or so that sugar has become a staple in our diets. So, coincidentally, again, correlation is not causation, but I do find it sus that it's only in the last 200 years that obesity has really become a problem, along with heart disease and other metabolic syndromes. So, but it's not fair. Right? Having said all that, it's not fair, right? We all know somebody who is able to eat candy, cake, and cookies with absolute impunity. They never gain an ounce of fat. Their health is a bright, shining beacon that we should all strive for. And I mean, there's fitness influencers I follow who do that calories in, calories out, and they're wonderful. They look amazing. They have no problem with it. Good for them. But if you are someone who has struggled for years with excess weight, I think this book is worth a look. He breaks down traditional diets and how people can overcome sugar addiction to find better health. He does point out that depending on how much damage your system has experienced, it may take you longer to lose the weight. And not even emphasizing exercise, but that's kind of why I'm not just going like, well, I'll try it for a month and see what happens, especially not this month. It's December. I'm quite sure I'll be falling off my little wagon here periodically over the next few weeks. My write-up was kind of loosey-goosey this week because there is so much in there that I'm like, okay, maybe I should have done more on the write-up just so I would have all the points there. But it's been literally spinning through my brain all week going, okay, this is kind of interesting. This is some interesting stuff here. Is it really worth the shot to go for this? But I'm going to give it 6 months because that's about when my annual checkup is due anyways, so I can have him check my cholesterol levels and my weight and everything else then. And while he isn't emphasizing exercise, I am adding exercise to try and regain some of the mobility that I've lost and, see if I can get those knees working a little better. Because 5'4" and 190 pounds is not healthy. I mean, health at any size is a myth, guys. I know that it sounds good, right? Fat acceptance, yay! Good for you. If that's part of you and that's part of the community that you feel happy and confident and comfortable in, good for you. I am not. I am miserable being this overweight. And I'm not saying you can't have your cake. I'm just saying that I'm putting the fork down for now. And that's it for this week. So if you liked what you saw, don't forget to subscribe, share my videos, let me know what you think in the comments. I'll see y'all next week. Bye.